Okay, this is the video guide on creating a poem analysis essay, and this is the first of 5 parts that are all designed to give you all of the skills and all of the steps that you're going to need to know in order to create a poem analysis essay at a Year 9 level. Just to really set up a little bit of background here, this really draws together a lot of things that we've already covered. Okay, so we've already learned about the 3 functions of planning and analysis, and that's represented in the wheel where we talk about themes, techniques and content, and we did that in a previous assignment. We've also talked quite a lot about interpretation, and you might find some notes on some of our sways or even for previous assignments where we talked about the difference between a sophisticated interpretation and a limited interpretation. So your understanding of that concept will really help you here. We've also learned the structure of teal before. So this isn't the first paragraph that you've done. In fact, you've probably already been assessed on your understanding of teal, but this is your opportunity to clarify that understanding and be reassessed to show how you've grown in your knowledge. You'll also remember that we've been working on our knowledge of nominalization over the last few weeks. We've done a lot of different work on these. So I'll cover what it is fairly briefly, but then I'll be jumping right into the nit and grit of it. So if you don't know that stuff, go back and look at some of your handouts and notes and some of the classwork that we've done. To give a bit of purpose to this, this assignment really combines all of the skills I just talked about to show a really deep understanding of critical thinking, interpretation, and formal language. You know, we're really looking into this idea of how to write professionally, and that's what I mean by formal language. So these are the key skills you get out of this, and this is why it's valuable. This is why we're doing it. There's really a process we're going to follow here. The first is to pick your poem, and you'll know that you've got your yellow booklet, and you can pick anything from the booklet, or you can pick any poem by Sylvia Plath, Virginia Woolf, or Emily Dickinson. They're the 3 main poets that we're looking at for this unit. Once you've picked your poem, you'll perform an analysis of it, and you might perform an analysis of a couple of poems to actually help you decide which one you're going to do. But what matters is that you go through that process before you start writing, because that puts everything in place, and then you're going to draft your paragraphs. And this PowerPoint is really here to help you through that process. Okay, so it's important that you're looking at it and you can start and stop as you go. But really do use it, because I've tried to break down all of the different sections of writing an essay for you. There is a week-by-week schedule in terms of where you should be up to in your work, and I gave everyone a copy of this in class, but you can see that it's here as well, and you can pause this video if you need to have a bit of a look at where you are, if you've fallen behind or if you've been away. This just tells you essentially the rate that we're going, and you can see that the final essay is actually due on the Thursday of week 3. So you've got to make sure that you're working at a solid pace in this. All right, so we're going to go into part 1 first. So this is about analysis. Now, I am making the assumption with this part that you've chosen your poem. Okay, so I'm going to be creating my analysis based on the poem we discussed in class, and that poem is It's Like I'm Blindfolded by Anthony Pittman. And you can see that up on our sway, and I'll also go over it quickly here. What we're really looking at is this model with the 3 circles, and it's about identifying the theme, the technique, and the content. And the idea that we've got is that you can't really start writing a paragraph, you can't start writing your essay until you understand these 3 things. Okay, so if you can get these 3 things together, that gives you the guts of a paragraph. And you can see down the bottom here how that relates to the topic, sentence, elaboration, and the evidence. Okay. This was the poem that we looked at. It's Like I'm Blindfolded, and you can actually see a video of Anthony Pittman himself reading this on the sway, but otherwise you're welcome to pause and read for yourself. But we read it in class, and we had a bit of a chat about what it meant, and I'm using some of that information to really bring things together. Essentially, when we talked about it as a class, there were 4 key themes that we identified, and when I say theme, we're really talking about what do we think this poem's actually about? Like, what do we think it actually teaches us about in life? So we've got 4 different options here. Accepting responsibility. You know, we get this sense in the poem that Anthony Pittman feels like he's had to take on really more than his lot. He feels like he's had to accept responsibility and grow up really quickly. And of course, that's another one here on the side. Growing up is another theme. Losing innocence, and that's kind of related to growing up in the sense that he talks about kind of losing his childhood or wanting to lose his childhood so that he can kind of get on with it and stop being treated like a child or a failure. And then, of course, that takes us to our fourth point, which is being seen as a failure. And he makes some real talk about, the perceptions, the kind of social perceptions people can have. The next step, so once I read it, and this didn't come to me straight away. I had to read it a few times. I had to look at each line, really break it down, and try and think about what I thought the poem was about. Once I did this, then I started to look for some of the techniques that were in there. And if you look through this, you can see that I've identified 5 different techniques. I've identified the simile at the top. I found a metaphor in there. I actually found a couple of metaphors. I found personification, kind of treating the world as though it was human. There were a couple of rhetorical questions in there. And down the bottom, there was a direct address to the audience in saying, for your own good, you're forced to grow up, where he kind of speaks to us like it's actually us that are going through the experience. So I found a whole range of different techniques in there. And once I thought about my techniques, my next goal was to try and connect those techniques to what themes I found, So this idea of growing up, it's like I'm blindfolded. He says I'm unable to see the path that I must follow, but unable to stop walking. I've linked that simile to the theme of growing up, this idea that it's this thing that's happening to him and there's nothing he can do about it, and he's got no control or perception of where he's going. I've linked the metaphor to losing innocence, this idea of his skin being shed, almost like his childhood being shed, or trying to escape from his childhood. Personification, it talks to the fact the world doesn't listen to failures, so he's personified the world in that case, and that's really linked to that theme of being a failure. And of course, accepting responsibility links to when he says, you're forced to grow up, for your own good. And that's really where he brings in that direct address to the audience. So I've tried to think really carefully about the link between that. Once I've done that, the next section was pretty easy. I just had to then grab my examples of those things. So if I wanted an example of a simile, well, I just had to take that section up the top. It's like I'm blindfolded. So that's already highlighted. And all I've really done is moved this section, moved everything into the middle section. It looks kind of a little bit messy, but what I've really done here is I've created the possibility of 4 different paragraphs. And those are kind of here, and I can sort of label them, but these, in this case, these 3 elements are related. And if I was going to turn these into a paragraph, I would have my topic sentence, I would have my elaboration, and I would have my evidence here. Okay, and that's, so I'd have half my paragraph ready to go. So it's really important to use this process because this gives me options about how I'm going to write my essay. I've got 4 options here because I've created 4 different themes, 4 different techniques and evidence to support them. But I only need to pick 2 because for this assignment I only need 2 paragraphs, but it goes to show, like maybe if I was in year 10 or year 11, I might need to write 4 paragraphs, or maybe I had to write 1,000 or even 2,000 words. So this kind of goes to show how I could have done that. But in this case, I'm just going to pick paragraph 3 and paragraph option 4, okay, to take me through. Now I'm just going to change the layout of these a little bit, and you might choose to do the same just to help you. But as you can see, I've turned it into a really simple table where you can just see the theme, technique, and content for the first and second paragraph. And there's no reason why losing innocence was first rather than second. I just put it there because I thought it was probably a good place to start, and it was, perhaps a better introduction to the theme and the purpose of the text. But once you get to this point, so now that I'm here, now I'm actually ready to write my first paragraph. Okay, so I wouldn't have been able to start writing my essay until I actually had these things in place. And of course, the next stage, the next part in the series of videos is all about exactly how you should do that.